All right. Looks like I'm somehow live once again. Just wanted to go on today because it's been a while since I've been on here, and I have an outline of things that I'd like to go through. A couple ideas that will build upon the last live stream where I went through and broke down all the different logical fallacies and all these different ways in which we as humans tend to get in our own way and tend to live in a very kind of inefficient manner. The thing is, there's a certain power in understanding, which somehow we always forget because of the inherent trend that is popular in the world right now of wanting to go backwards and look backwards and somehow look at the past in a very negative manner. And the core of what I think a lot of that actually is self-hatred and self-loathing. Um, and I'll talk a lot more about that uh, as this goes on because I've really been, trying to understand these things and see where it actually comes from and what the actual core of it is. And I think that's really the crux. So in this live stream, I'm going to talk about that. I'll talk about emotional intelligence, how I define what emotional intelligence actually is, the core characteristics and qualities of emotional intelligence, because I think that's important to do because I see there's a lot of confusion around that today where people think having a lot of emotions is emotional intelligence or being very emotional is emotional intelligence when it really isn't. It's just being emotional or having a lot of emotions, which is the opposite of intelligence. Which again, I'll get into and clarify that, and then talk about the mental health industrial complex and how a lot of times uh, these industries end up being created by unwell people for unwell people to feel better about being unwell and to coerce others into being unwell without actually solving anything. Because a lot of the times a it's an activity a person passively engages within trying to solve the problem that they themselves are actively creating for themselves. And then the more they get into it, the bigger the problem gets and the worse it gets and the more deeply ingrained it becomes. And in reality, they're just creating it for themselves. And it's kind of funny actually when you when you really zoom out and just see how adept many people are at making themselves miserable and actually torturing themselves and making their world very uncomfortable when it might not have to be. And just as an example of this, because I've been saying these things for many years, right? And it's oftentimes fell on deaf ears. So, a great example of what I mean and what I'm referring to within a lot of people is look at the hatred, the vitriol, the bigotry, the prejudice, the just vile, disgusting things that came out of people during COVID and the disgusting things that come out of people around the election cycle. And basically, whenever people are under some stress, you see these things come out. And the thing is, that didn't come from nowhere. Those that evil stuff where you had nice people on Monday being virtuous and on Tuesday wishing death upon anyone that disagreed with them, that didn't come from nowhere, and that's not accidental, and it's not happenstance, and it didn't go away. I would argue that it probably actually got worse. Maybe it's not bubbling at the surface right now, but it's still there. I've been saying this for years because it's been obvious to me. It's been crystal clear. If you deal with people and converse with them enough, uh, you can see it in some people. Obviously, not all people. There's a lot of really wonderful, great people in the world. Obviously, I'm not making blanket statements. I'm referring to specific sets of people, specific dynamics that are occurring in the world right now that if you're paying attention to anything within evolving media, I'm sure you've probably seen it. And I'm hoping you've probably seen the way things have changed over the last 4 years. And I'm talking about kind of why and this occurs. So that's all relates to what I want to get into. So I'll just dive right into the whole aspect of emotional intelligence and what it actually is, what it actually means. So what it is not, which I will clarify first, is that it's not being really emotional. It's not just having a lot of emotions and having a lot of feelings. It's not just being reactive to things. Oh, I care so much. Look how much this bothers me because I care. Not necessarily. If you actually cared, that would be expressed through action. And it isn't usually expressed through action. So that means you probably don't actually care. You're just doing it for some other reason, some performative peacock masquerade sort of thing. It's not simply feeling your feelings strongly. It's not simply spending years analyzing and sifting through all your feelings and all your past experiences and uncovering traumas and uncovering these hidden things. Those things are all just what they are. And again, to clarify for the I'm sure reactions that will inevitably come up, I'm not saying emotions are bad. I'm not saying feelings are bad. What I'm saying is exactly what I just said. I'm not saying anything other than what I just said. If I wanted to say they were bad or I wanted to say we shouldn't have them, that's what I would have said. But I didn't say that because that's not what I think, feel, believe, or am talking about whatsoever. What I think, feel, believe, and trying to talk about is exactly the words that I use, which is why I chose those words because that's what I wanted to say. I just say that because as soon as you talk about feelings and emotions, people immediately get very polarized. Like, oh, it's either amazing and I'm so empowered because I have so many of them. And then it often ends in, oh, well, he was seemed to be critical, so he must think they're bad or something. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I said because it's not what I meant. They are what they are. It's part of life. It's part of being a human, and we have them. And if you didn't have them, you might be dead. It's like, so obviously it's kind of part of life. The crux is how we relate to them and how we work with them. So, how I would define emotional intelligence, now that I defined what it is not, is emotional intelligence is a dynamic and adaptable combination of self awareness, self regulation, social skills, relationship management skills, communication skills, empathy, and motivation in a very general sense. Obviously, it can be more, but in a general sense, these are qualities and dynamics that I personally associate with emotional intelligence. Now, you'll notice that has nothing to do with feeling your feelings very strongly or being very reactive or being really emotional. No, it actually comes down to things that actually demonstrate intelligence and actually demonstrate maturity and actually, for some people, take some work, some practice, some effort, some energy. So self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, relationship management skills, communication skills, empathy, and then motivation. And I would argue, I am arguing, that if those things are absent and a person is not moving in that direction and they're not developing those qualities, they're actually not getting more intelligent and they're not getting more efficient and effective at their life. And what I see a lot of people doing within spirituality or self help or the mental health industrial complex is oftentimes not developing those qualities and actually going the opposite direction, getting more reactive, finding more things to be triggered by and bothered by, and more or less just getting better at being unwell and being more basically taking their emotional distortion and making it stronger, making it more well established, making it more concrete, which is, I would say, the opposite of health. That's actually, in reality, taking us closer to death because it's making us more fixed and rigid and concrete and solid and heavy. So I can almost guarantee that the more person goes in that concrete direction, their energy is going to go down, Their digestion will suffer. They're going to be tired. They're going to be cranky. Their nervous system is eventually just going to be unhinged. Their life will get smaller and smaller and smaller, and they will become more small-minded, more rigid, less flexible, and their health will go down a lot, which is great if, you know, you are trying to create drug addicts or you're trying to create people that are lifetime dependents upon a system. Because in reality, these systems should be in the business of going out of business, meaning person comes in the door, okay, now you're good. See you later. Don't ever come back because you're good. Meaning the aim should be to empower people with these skills so that they can then navigate and deal with their life in a mature, adult, efficient, and effective manner. And if it's not doing that, then it's obviously doing something else, which oftentimes is just indoctrinating someone into a political ideology, making them feel like a victim, making them engage within the victim Olympics and engage in this dynamic of emotional bullying, where it's like whoever's the bigger victim wins, whoever's more adept at using the right phrases and buzzwords and slogans and placards wins and is at the top of the heap. Because fundamentally, it is based in a profound ignorance and misunderstanding of how humans actually work, how we actually function, what actually drives us, and what our life actually is in a real, meaningful human manner, which is obviously what happens when your political ideology is in the front seat and in the driver. You automatically dehumanize yourselves and you dehumanize other people, which that can only occur if we're talking about something created by unwell people for unwell people to feel better about being unwell and then to also coerce other people about being unwell. And if that is not the case, if what I'm saying is not true, then why is it that really the common idea within these systems or paradigms is that, oh, everyone's traumatized, everyone's wounded, everyone's broken? That's kind of their fundamental idea. And then even if someone feels really good and their life is great, they're like, "Oh no, you just haven't discovered and uncovered your trauma." And this is a real that's like a foundational idea within their paradigm. And if that is not true, then here's two examples. Number one, I can't tell you the countless amount of people that I've spoken to who have been doing the work, for 20 years, maybe 30 years. And in the same sense of them bragging and hyping themselves up and, pulling out their ego penis in front of me about all this work that they've been doing. And then in the same breath, but it's something I'm always going to live with and I'm always going to have it and it's always going to be there. But I've made so much progress and I'm just so much better. But it's always just going to be there. It's like, well, then what are you doing? Like you could have just been doing other things with all of this time, energy, and money instead of just honing in on this thing that obviously isn't changed, has not changed, will not change, and isn't going away by your own definition. So then what's the point? Which, and then obviously, of course, there's a spectrum to it. There are people who are barely functional who need assistance and need help. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the outliers. I'm referring to the bell curve of people who, like I said, are mostly just creating their own suffering and their own misfortune and making their life a lot more difficult than it actually needs to be because of some other motivation. And they don't actually know what that motivation is, so they'll never actually resolve it. They'll just keep on the hamster wheel. Which, if that's not the case, then why are all these industries massively expanding and why do people stay in for life? If they're so effective and they're so clever and they're able to fix and be so successful, then you would think people would be dropping out and then it wouldn't just be growing, but it's actually just making people worse and then normalizing people being worse and unwell. So then everyone thinks, oh, maybe I am too, because in general, humans are herd creatures. If the herd is doing this, mostly everyone's going to be like, oh, well, I should just go on with this. There was a study, I can't remember the name, but it was basically this kind of idea where people in a group setting went along with things they knew weren't that they went along with things that they knew were not true simply because the group was doing it, and they didn't want to feel ostracized, or they didn't want to feel put on the spot by the group, so they just went along with it. And I think fundamentally that's how most people function, because we're social animals. We're not too different from dogs or a lot of other creatures on the planet in that regard. Most people will not and cannot separate their identity from those dynamics, because I mean, we're humans, we're mammals. Like this, it's so deeply ingrained within us. So the second example I can give you upon that is the amount of people that I've talked to, which is a lot, because for whatever reason I just get into interesting conversations with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different contexts. Um, People that I speak to who never have had any addiction, no criminality, no issue holding down a job, no issue with stability in their life whatsoever. They have been married for a long time. They have a functional, healthy relationship. They have kids. But basically, their life is just stable, normal, fine, right? And then they start talking about, oh, I have all this trauma and been doing all this inner work and all this healing, and I discovered all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And I kid you not, one person was genuinely like, yeah, over the last 15 years, I just got really angry a couple of times. And I just realized that, clearly I have this trauma I need to work through. I'm like, in the course of 15 to 20 years, you got angry twice? I'm like, you realize some people live in a constant state of anger and have like drug addiction, abuse, violence, like actual real problems. And you live in a multi-million dollar home, you've been married for decades, you have kids, you have a successful career, you have no health problems, no real issues whatsoever, but you're making up this whole scenario and doing all this stuff and taking yourself through this experience because you got angry a couple of times, and it all traces back to some awkward childhood experience that you suppressed. I'm just like, guys, I really cannot think of a more self-absorbed, egotistical, arrogant, entitled, pointless endeavor than this. And this is genuinely what millions and millions of people are engaged within, is finding these micro, minute little rice grains of their experience and turning it into these massive things. And they can only do that because their life is really good. Because if your life is genuinely difficult and hard, or you're trying to just survive, you don't have that luxury. And that's really the crux of what I'm talking about, is the word luxury here. It's all of these people with luxury making themselves seem like victims, which is the most disgusting, one of the more disgusting things that people can do, because there are actual victims. There are people who actually suffered, actually had a hard life, and maybe genuinely dealt with horrible things. I've known people like this. Like, so I can look at the compare and contrast of these types of things and see the people, and see obviously the vast majority of people are not in the dealing with genuinely horrible things category. Most of the people are just entitled, like neurotic people who are just indulging in, like, their lives are so good, generally speaking, that they have to make their own misery. Like, it reminds me of this influencer video I saw on Instagram recently, where it's this couple and they're obviously wealthy, either from family, probably from family, because they're both pretty young. I think she has rich parents. They're traveling the world, having this absolutely luxurious high-end lifestyle across the board. Um, and then they're posting a video, and the girl's having like a massive emotional meltdown because her boyfriend ate lunch before they were going to hang out, even though she told him that they weren't going to eat. Like, So he went out with his friends and like went for coffee and had a sandwich and then told her, and she just had an absolute emotional meltdown, hours of turmoil and drama. And just like you would think her dog or her parents just died tragically. That was the degree of her emotional reaction to this absolutely trivial event. Like, because they were going to hang out. And she told him before, oh, don't worry about it. Like, do whatever you want. We don't need to eat. So then he did. And then she dealt with the consequences of her own words, actions, and choices that were completely trivial because they still hung out and they still were living this luxury lifestyle and are going to go and do all these nice things. But she's acting like the world is ending. And I know that's a stupid story. I think this is what a lot of people are doing. I talk to a lot of people that I know who have these really easy lifestyles. And then I'm talking to them about their problems and their issues, and they're absolutely trivial. Like and I don't mean that to be demeaning. I mean, it's literally like, it's just like that story. It's just completely something they're making up for themselves that then propels them into having to do all of this therapy and all of this self work and reflection. It's like, or you could just maybe develop some emotional intelligence and maturity and not make yourself miserable over literally nothing. And also subsequently insult, dehumanize, and minimize people with like actual problems. Because ultimately, that's what it is the vast majority of the time. Which is why people that get into these endeavors get really good at the victim Olympics, because it's ultimately a highly self absorbed, egotistical endeavor, which is the opposite of emotional intelligence, which is why I said at the beginning, it's not just being really emotional or having a lot of emotions or having a lot of feelings or being really reactive or just spending hours or years just sorting through it. That's not intelligence. That's the opposite of intelligence. Like, I don't know. I know that's probably a trigger for some people, but it's quite quite strange. So, anyways, like I said, recap: self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, relationship management skills, communication skills, empathy, motivation. Those qualities, those things, those characteristics personally are what I believe are emotional intelligence. And obviously, yes, they're dynamic and they're adaptable, and it's, a work in progress. Of course, I have to, use some soft language. None of us are perfect and it's all work in progress and we're all human and da, 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 da. It's like, which yeah, is obviously true. Uh, so yeah, the last thing that I'll say about that is, in regards to the idea that underlies a lot of these endeavors, which is, oh, everyone has trauma, everyone's traumatized, everyone's suffering, everyone's in pain, everyone's barely hanging on it for life, everyone's barely able to get by, everyone's barely able to, uh, you know, deal with their life things. And the thing is, the people that are usually saying it, I hate to break it to you, are, at least on social media, it's commonly a certain demographic, which I won't name, that has tech jobs where they pay really well. The demand on them is extremely low. And it's more or less like corporate welfare, corporate daycare. And the demands upon them are just normal adult activities, if even that. Like just basic stuff, like responding to emails, cooking yourself a meal, doing your laundry. Like millions of people, adults, are struggling with those basic things. Not because there's anything actually wrong with them, but because they're just caught up in this endeavor. Like, oh, well, because I have these 39 syllables attached to me, when I look at my laundry on my bed, I can't do it. I get overwhelmed. It's like, no, you could do it. You can just walk up and go. Like, there are people on the planet with actual real problems. And someone making 150, 250, 300, $400,000 a year to effectively work maybe 12 hours a week, and they're struggling to do their laundry or text people or do emails, really, it's like you have the most amazing lifestyle compared to the vast majority of humans that have ever existed. And you're having an emotional meltdown because of the tone, your the tone of your interpretation of your coworker's tone in an email that ruins your week. And you need 3 hours of therapy to process your emotions about this trivial event. It's like there are real problems in the world. There are people who genuinely dealt with really bad things and are currently dealing with, and I'm telling you, that's not one of them. Like, uh, but why I mention it is because their common presumption is that everyone is broken and everyone is traumatized. But what that actually is projection. Because what happens is really insecure people tend to function almost exclusively through logical fallacies. They tend to function almost exclusively through logical fallacies because they are in a highly distorted emotional position, which means that cuts them off from the world, that cuts them off from other people, that cuts them off from genuine connection because they are unable to have empathy and they are unable to listen because of their insecurity, the logical fallacies from the emotionally distorted position, which means they generally feel terrible. And it's this like self fulfilling prophecy of feeling terrible because we're humans. When you feel cut off from other people, we don't feel very good, typically. But then the old saying is misery loves company. So come to the rescue. Now I've discovered my spiritual path of a lot of other people who are equally or greater mentally challenged and unwell and disturbed. Oh, now that's reflected back. So now I feel kind of better, but also worse, but also kind of better because it's at least misery loves company, but also we all feel worse. But there's still not connection there because they can't have empathy because they can't listen. So then what happens is they have to insist that, oh, everyone is like them because they can only see themselves because they're functioning almost exclusively through projection because of their highly distorted emotional position, which makes them really insecure. And through all the logical fallacies, they probably make bad decisions, which lead to bad outcomes, which make them feel even worse. So then they insist, oh, everyone must be like them, which in reality is obviously not true. It's just because their self is so inherently dysfunctional that it can only assume that everyone else must be like them and everything must be like them. And if people are not like them or there's a variance of opinion, then they shoot them down with their laundry list of emotional fallacies or the victim Olympics or whatever, kind of ad hominem attacks masquerading as some progressive ideology or even a religious ideology, which more often than not are just coercion tactics used by insecure people, which is why they need the thing in the first place to fill in this internal void. It fills in their void because it empowers them with skills, and not skills, but it empowers them with responses and reflexes to manipulate and coerce and control other people. Ultimately, is what happens a lot of the time, is because their self is so inherently dysfunctional, which is why it's so common that you have people who speak about the past, or they speak about humans, or they speak about power, or they speak about control, or they speak about organization or structure in an inherently pathological negative manner. Like, for example, you have people talk about the past, 1950s America, or traditional gender roles or marriages. And it's like, oh, yeah, disgusting. Ugh. And it's like the assumption is that it's this oppressive, abusive, negative, horrible situation. And it's like, well, no, sure, maybe, possibly, because, there's a variance in humanity, but like that's your reflex assumption about this mass group of people. I hate to break it to you, but that's called prejudice and bigotry. That's what that is. That's not intelligence. That's the opposite of intelligence. I don't care if you went to Harvard or Stanford and you have an MBA or a PhD, you're an idiot. If a human being is a bigot or functioning through bigotry and prejudice, they're not intelligent. I don't care how many degrees they have, which I guess maybe for me to assume that all bigots and prejudices are not intelligent as is also a form of bigotry and prejudice, but it's against bigots and prejudice people, so it's okay. I don't know. Maybe there's some wonderful bigots that are not bigots, but then it's like if they're a bigot, then that's the definition of the word. Anyways, I think that's just funny. Um, so I'm just saying, yeah. And I can't tell you the amount of times that I've talked to people about this, where I say like, oh yeah, I grew up in a kind of traditional household, or I grew up in Indiana, and they're like, ooh, yeah. Like they get all like, what do you mean? You just like, oh, it must have been horrible. No, your grandfather must have been a real scumbag, or your dad must be horrible. And I'm like, what? No, like, what are you talking about? Or I thought, oh, I went to church, and there were all I was a little kid, and I was hanging out with all these, World War II veterans. They're like, oh, they must have all been alcoholics, right? Like, no, none of them were alcoholics. None of them drank. None of them did drugs. Oh, they must have beat their wives, right? No. Oh, they must have been racist scumbags. No. What are you talking about? Like, I can think of at least 50 conversations that I've had personally. That's not even counting the internet or movies and media and all these things that is just pushing this idea that anyone with power or control or structure or authority or organization or competency is inherently a scumbag or anything. As far as you want to take those things, that's just the prejudiced assumption. And what I realize is that where that comes from is the dynamics that I'm talking about here, but in the simplest sense, that just comes from self hatred and self loathing. It comes from their identity being so dysfunctional because they have no capacity for empathy and no capacity for listening because of their emotionally distorted position. They just assume everyone is just horrible as they are, because all those assumptions and prejudice and biases against those stories, that doesn't reveal or communicate anything about the things. It just communicates how horrible that person is and genuinely miserable they probably are, and how genuinely isolated and conflict oriented they probably are, because they're functioning from a massively distorted position that they are masquerading as healthy or progressive or conscious or spiritual or awakened or enlightened or plant medicine-y or all these types of things, which is mostly, again, just people actively engaged in creating their own suffering, because that's all optional. None of us have to do it. There's other options. There's it's like people always talk about how, these are just a few examples, but I was thinking about this today, where you look online, you'll see all these raw food proponents talk about how all the life force, and I'm like, well, then why do you look anemic? Like, why do you have to spend all day online defending this position if you have all this energy? And why are like these long-term people dying? Like, uh, why isn't it the most robust, massively like look great looking people are promoting these types of things? It's like, well, maybe because that's not actually the thing that's happening. And then the same goes for these types of ideologies and ideas. It's typically not people that I would necessarily want to ever associate with. After meeting a lot of, spending years going to these events and going to and meeting lots of teachers and authorities and healers and professors of all types of different things, and just realizing that, like, yeah, I don't think these actual qualities are actually here in this thing. Sorry, I got distracted. My heater turned off. So that train of thought on that was not very good. I can't remember where I was even going with that, but I think it was probably just going back to the self-loathing and the self-hatred, which I think underpins these things, um, which is ultimately what it comes down to. Because if you have emotional intelligence, meaning self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, communication skills, relationship skills, empathy, and motivation, uh, you still might hate yourself and have self-loathing, but I think you would at least be able to do it in a functional way. And realize that you have all of those things, and then maybe start to that to be the crack that opens it up, and you see how much what you might be doing might actually be about something else entirely altogether. Um, because as it relates to a lot of this stuff, uh, I don't think people actually care or that they necessarily even want to change or necessarily even want to fix something. I can give you a great example of this. Speaking to a number of people in recent times about certain internal arts things, right? And they're like, "Oh, I have this thing, or I have this problem, or this issue, or I'm stuck on something." And I'm like, "Okay, well, here's the thing. Here's the solution. Here's maybe what to do. Here's something to consider. Here's my experience. Here's what I think is helpful. Something, right?" And then their response is just keep repeating the same thing over and 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 keep repeating it the same way over and over again, different ways, different da, 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 come at the same angle. And I might say, hey, you're just repeating the same thing. Oh, well, I thought I was asking different questions. No, look at it. You're saying the exact same thing over and 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 over again. So if you actually really wanted to solve it or move past it, you would just stop that, all this hamster wheeling, and just do the other thing, because that's the other thing, which is the outcome, the action, the behavior, the attitude, the intention, the focus that goes in a different direction. But you're not. You're just still doing the same dysfunctional thing. So you're probably not actually interested in changing or growing or fixing or solutioning or solving whatever. It's just the same. And I think, to be totally honest with you, in the context of internal arts, I think for a great majority of the people, that's what it is. And actually, a lot of teachers at a certain point end up just being purely entertainment, because people, I don't believe, are actually engaged within the process that is there, because they're operating at the periphery of their experience based on the dynamics that I've already spent 37 minutes discussing. So, yeah, that's basically all I had for this one. Um, and For me, it's helpful to understand the underlying dynamics of things, which is why in the previous live stream I laid out all these different fallacies and what they are and how they're used and examples of such. Because when you start to see them, or at least have awareness of them, you can see them in yourself when you're doing it to yourself. Because sometimes I think actually a lot of emotional reactions are just logical fallacies. And if you actually just stop and look and use your brain, sometimes that can actually interrupt the pattern and interrupt what the thing is. And you can actually see, like, oh, wait, I'm just acting like a primate for no reason. Like, I could just chill and maybe do something else or not. At least see, like, oh, I'm here because I did all of these things and I could have done different things, which would have not led me here. Okay. Um, it's this weird thing of having a brain and trying to use it, rather than the opposite direction that I think a lot of people go, which is just have emotions and have more emotions, and then have more, and then have more, and then tell everyone you're special because you have a lot, and then tell everyone you're better than them because you have more and you feel more, and da da da. You're an empath, you're an HSP, which I don't think is actually true. Personally, I've never met an empath or an HSP where anything they said was actually accurate. Um, I know they exist. I'm sure they do. I'm just saying that the vast majority of the time, what I've heard from these people is a lot of gobbledygook, or just their subjective experience has nothing to do with discernment or clarity or um, whatever. It's a lot of times just your nervous system is overwhelmed. So what happens is, um, like when emotionality builds up in the body, it creates like this. It's like if you ever seen Pigpen from Charlie Brown, how there's like always just dirt and dust around him, right? So that's kind of how emotions are when they really, really build up for people. It's just this like dirt dust cloud that's all around them that makes their nervous system just hyper stimulated all the time. That manifests as physiological anxiety. It manifests as racing thoughts. It manifests as emotional reactivity. Manifests as being very kind of hyperactive. And to be totally honest with you, a lot of people are construing that state as being good or progressive or spiritual or conscious or fill in the blank. They either do that or they do the opposite, or they have that state within them, but they invest a tremendous amount of energy to like pretend like they're not that. So then you get the people that are like this. I am a meditation spiritual person, and I've just returned from the jungles of ayahuasca, and I've seen, brother, I've seen the beauty in the darkness and the light. And in reality, my nervous system is completely fried. So I have to talk like this. And I'm having to hold myself still and pretend that I'm really calm. But in actuality, my nervous system is completely fried. Or you get, hi, I'm a spiritual meditation teacher. Uh, yeah, everything's beautiful and I love everyone, and it's just it's all so wonderful and heart opening, and they do this a lot. It's just it's just epic and delicious, the juiciness of life, and oh, and I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm trying to illustrate the constriction in their throat, and the constriction in their chest, and the constriction in their nervous system, and how it seems like they're ready to burst into tears or murder someone at the drop of a hat. Uh, so I'm just telling you, with those two extremes in mind, go look at spiritual meditation teachers and influencers. I can almost guarantee you they're going to fall into those categories because that's what they're actively engaged in doing, which is why they have to invest so much of their life into putting on this facade of being something else, is because they're in conflict with themselves. So they're having to react to that conflict and then put it out into the world, as if it's some ancient secret wisdom or some channeled download transmission higher, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you guys are really so unique and so enlightened and tapped in, why are you all the same? Like, why is it so homogenous? Why is it so predictable? And why does it trash people's health if it's so great? I don't know. It's just logic. That's the only thing that I'm asking. And I'm not trying to make fun of them necessarily. I was just using those voices to illustrate physiological things, which is exactly what happens. People get really constricted around their throat and around their chests, which you'll see it manifest in like this way. People get really collapsed, or they'll go to the extreme where they have to be like this. You see a lot of yoga, a lot of yoga chicks are either really collapsed in because their heart and their lungs are just checked out, or they go the other way. They're like, yes, I do lots of ashtanga and chest openers, and then they end up getting like a very militaristic male looking body, uh, where it's like a wet spaghetti noodle where they don't actually have any curves, but they get really muscular shoulders and pecs, and their hips, like their actual female shape is just like a straight line. They're like, no, my heart's really open. But if you say anything that doesn't agree with everything that I believe, then I'm going to fucking rip your head off. It's like, oh, yeah, you're really progressive, aren't you? Yes. As long as you agree with all of my politics and all of my ideology and conform to all of the work that I've done, I'm wonderful and spiritual and calm. It's like, really? All I got to do is say Trump. And then it's like, or all I got to say is like, do you cook? Well, there went 30 years of spiritual practice. All I had to do was ask if you cook. If you like cooking, I'm not saying, shut up, bitch, cook for me now, get in the kitchen. I'm just asking, you're a human, you're an adult. Do you enjoy the act of cooking your own food for yourself? All I'm saying is go out into the world, explore these ideas, or don't. Discard everything I'm saying. I don't really care. It makes no difference to me. It's just my opinion, my experience that I'm sharing with the hopes or the intention that it would make things a little easier for other like-minded individuals to navigate the world in which we live, and also to, in a weird way, actually have more empathy for people. If you actually understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from that, and can spend time thinking about them, their life, their experience, and understanding it, I think that's a useful thing. Because that's the weird thing is sometimes people think uh, that I'm like really mean. It's like, well, no, I'm trying to have the empathy for people. If you can't understand where people are coming from, why they're coming from that way, yeah, okay, I'm not warm and fuzzy and fucking um, pretending to be some pure love being nonsense because that would be lying and stupid. I would not do that. I mean, so that'd be great, but that's just I don't know. I have testosterone. I have testicles, and a brain. And it's just not how I function. It's not my thing. I'm not a warm maternal grandma. Um, let's see. What was I going with that? Oh yeah. Anyways, yeah, done with that. So Pierre says, would you say this relates to cultivation versus sensation? Internal arts, maybe emotion is considered an extension of sensation, and Western spirituality is heavily invested in sensation. I mean, I would say, in my personal opinion and experience, because obviously I can't speak as an ultimate authority on internal arts, but I can say that it seems like they all say to ignore sensation, and that sensation is not important, and that emotion is basically sensation. And I can tell you from experience and from observation that the more sensations people have is because they're very emotional. Like if you're not actually emotional, um, a lot of internal training is very boring because I meet people, I know people who are like, okay, so I felt this and this spiraled and this went here and this was hot and this was cold and I saw this and I heard this and this went here and this rotation and it's like this complicated thing. And usually it's because they're very mentally tense because of their emotions or they're having emotions, and that's what's what they're feeling moving all around their nervous system is emotionality. And I can tell you, even within my practice or whatever, if I'm annoyed or something, or just a little spent too much time on the computer looking at dumb stuff on the internet, and then I'm training, I notice it's a little like that quality is still there. It's a little bit annoyed. I wouldn't call it emotional, but it's annoyed. So then what I feel is actually a little more like reflective of that. Versus when I'm actually calm, it's very boring. It's like, oh, pressure. Oh, warmth. Oh, hot liquid. Oh, I'm in a magnet. Oh, it's not that really that exciting. uh, and then, yeah, sometimes there are emotional releases, but the idea is if you're having an emotional release, you would have already built in the mechanism within your body of the smile and the laughter so that no matter what the emotion is or the emotional whatever, you just laugh and it comes out as laughter. You don't actually experience whatever that thing was. And I can tell you, yeah, I mean, I've had experiences where it's like the deepest, most painful memory or the most vulnerable aspect it within whatever, my system. And I'm just like, that's funny. Or I think about something that annoyed me last week, a conversation I had with someone and it was annoying. And I was like, yeah, that's funny. It's kind of the same. Of course, I can see the tendency in my mind to be like, oh, but no, that's a trauma. And that's da da da, and wanted to do all this thing. But I think the direction is that it's just chi. And the idea is that that all would eventually kind of fade to the background, so to speak. Maybe you notice it, but you're like, yeah, whatever. And just it's actually more about the chi, because it's if it's qi gong or whatever, like they're not about the emotion. That's just whatever. They're about the chi behind it, which is why there's just five. That's it. Not 1,000, not a million, just five, because it's just an energetic quality. Which once you start having a certain degree of chi built in your system, you feel the actual quality of each emotion. And then you're like, oh, that makes sense why they describe it this way, because you actually feel it. And you're like, oh, that's what that is. Huh. It's almost like that's what that is. But you just kind of know it because you experience it tangibly, repeatedly over time. So it's like you're actually engaging with that thing in a real meaningful way, not just an abstract intellectual idea or concept, which is often what people are doing anyways with their emotions and sensations are still external. They're still superficial, even though it might be the deepest whatever, it's still external, it's still superficial. So yeah, good question though. Yeah. I have a random question. Hear your opinion. Can men and women be platonic friends? Probably. I mean, I've seen it. People do it. I don't know. I think there's always going to be some probably sexual tension between them, but obviously, it just depends. But yeah, it just depends on the context. I mean, I think I've told the story before where I've been on a date with a girl and she's like, "Oh, my best friends are guys." And I was like, "Based on you and the dynamic I'm seeing here, I don't think those guys are your friends. I think they're just orbiting. And I guarantee you, if you called any of them right now and said, 'Hey, come over, sleep with me,' they all would drop everything they're doing and do it immediately." No, that's not true. Actually, yeah, I think that is true. You're right. Actually, yeah, they all would do that except for the gay one. Like, yeah, exactly. So, I think yes, it is possible, but of course, takes it kind of depends. You got to look at the context, look at what's actually there. Um, but yeah, I'm not big on it. For example, personally speaking, really, if I was dating a girl or I was with her and she had a bunch of guy friends, I really wouldn't be that on board with it. I mean, of course, I'm sure there can be exceptions and what have you. But if she's like constantly texting a bunch of other dudes and hanging out with guys, I'm not probably not gonna be interested in that type of lady unless it's like a friend group and it's like I said, obviously there's exceptions, um, and vice versa. I think if I was with a female and I'm texting 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever other females on my phone, I don't know that they would necessarily be that on board with it. So yes and no, just depends. Um, but people definitely lie and are full of shit sometimes. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. And the thing is, like, if we're talking about the subject, a lot of guys would want to trash women, oh, women are superficial and they're just using guys for attention and they're keeping them in orbit. But the thing is, the guys are the ones giving them the attention. The guys are the ones being in orbit. The guys are the ones actively engaging in that behavior, which is kind of pathetic. Like if I meet a girl in a dating context, she's like, "Oh, I'd love to be friends." I'm like, "Cool. We're never going to speak again. Have a good one." Because it's like, if you want a friend, get a dog. Like I'm not interested to just give you all the time and the energy of a romantic relationship without any of the actual return, whatever. But a lot of guys are content to do that because, oh, maybe someday. Of course, that being said, there are some females that I am friends with in just a platonic manner. So that's all I can say about that. You kind of have to just use your own adult discernment and decide for yourself in that scenario. But that's everything I have on my outline. If there's questions, I'm happy to stay on and answer them in quotes. But if not, that is everything I had on the outline, which I think is pretty good. And hopefully, many people watched the previous live stream and have actually reflected upon that information. But I don't think people actually really do. Some people do, I know, because I talk to them. But I think a lot of people don't because that's just human nature. Um, which is why, like, for example, there's a huge productivity industry, right? There's a huge, like, self help industry. And here's the secret to all of it: the secret to getting things done is doing the things that need to get done. The end. There doesn't need to be anything else said. Oh, you can rank them from most important to least important based on priority or timeline or based on your goals. Done. Doesn't need to be a weekend seminar. Doesn't need to be a $25,000 intensive to do whatever other than just entertain you at like a circus animal. It's just that. The secret to getting things done is doing the things that you need to get done. Nothing else to it. But there's a whole industry. People have written 25 books, 30 books about productivity, getting things done. How do you get more done? How do you do it? It's like it's it's just what I just said. There's really not that much more to it. Or getting yourself to a position where you can delegate. Uh, let's see. If I suffer from a huge fear of missing out whenever I'm studying hard on tasks, it creates a lot of anxiety. How do I deal with it? Um, I would say reflect on your priorities. Like if you're dedicating time to tasks that are high priority and high value for you, then what are you worried about? Um, because you're just creating the anxiety for yourself. And if it is a legitimate thing, then go do it. Like if you're really worried about missing out on something, then don't go do it. Problem solved. And if you do it, you'll either see, oh, I really was missing out on something, or you'll see, oh, I wasn't actually missing out on anything. So then you'll use your brain and your experience to arrive at a productive outcome so that you can make a different decision rather than just spinning your wheels, whatever. So reflect on priorities and what's important to you, what's valuable to you and in the direction that you're wanting your life to go, and then focus your time and your energy upon that. And if something that's really bothering you that you really feel like you're missing out on, then go do it. See if you are missing out. And you either will see that you are or you'll see that you're not. And then you can make an adjustment to your choices and behavior based on actual information. Doesn't strike me as particularly complicated. And then also, too, be a mature adult and realize you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Like, life requires sacrifice. If you want to be really good at something, it means you're probably not going to be really good at another thing, at least not for a while. that's just that's life. That's just being an adult. Um, and there's no solution to that other than just accepting it. And I guess like being a man about it, being an adult, and just realize like, okay, yeah, this is part of life. Okay. But again, I don't know your situation. I don't know you personally, so I can't really be more specific than that. So hopefully that is useful. How does jealousy play in that dynamic wherein a monogamous couple has a male friend that she sees regularly? Is jealousy and insecurity of immature man, or is it justified and normal? Again, there's no fixed answer. It really just depends on that um, situation and that relationship and the two people in that and their personality types. So can't really give a hard answer on that because there isn't one. So yeah, I think like I said, just have to use our adult brain on that one and look at the situation, listen to the situation, assess the situation for ourselves, and arrive at our own conclusions for ourselves, and not listen to dogmatic, ideological, cosplaying blowhards on the internet that tell us this hard, fast rule about things. It's like, well, no, you know. What about jealousy in general? Is it something inherently negative? Um, I don't know. That's a good question. I think probably it's not a great thing. I'm not. It's something that I don't really understand. I'm not a jealous person. Um, for example, if I see someone that's more successful than me, or they're richer, or they're in better shape, or which doesn't take much, or they're more skilled, or whatever, my response isn't jealousy. Usually, it's well, what did they do? How did they get there? Can I learn from that? Can I copy it? Can I benefit from that, etc. Whereas I think a lot of people look at that and get, I guess, jealous. They want to cut that person down, or they want to do all these other things. I don't know. I don't understand that personally. It's not how I function. And secondly, if I was in a relationship with a female where I felt jealousy, I would look, is this just me? Or probably it's not the right relationship, to be fair. It's probably not. There's probably something else going on. Um, Cause like I'm just trying to think of girls that I've dated and their friends. Like I never felt jealous. So I don't know. I would say, yeah, if a person in a relationship is feeling jealous, there's probably something else going on there that they should look into within that dynamic. Um, because yeah, that's not really a feeling or emotion you would associate with love and connection and trust. What do you think about AI being a possible genuine companion and possibly replacing human to human relationships? Oh yeah, I think it's definitely coming. Um, for sure, it's gonna happen because, like I've been saying for years, people already dehumanize themselves. People have been relating to other humans in a dehumanized manner for quite a while now. Like, yeah, that ship has sailed, man. That's we're past that. Uh, the thing, because all the stuff that I've been talking about in this video and the mental um, health industrial complex, and even all this progressive ideology in society that has put the genders against each other, and also just dissolved the concept of gender and everything in altogether. It's all just prepared people to really not be able to, or it's created an environment where people can't connect anyways, even if they wanted to, and they just can't figure out why. They just can't quite put their finger on exactly why, which is why you have all the feminists, people on that side trying to figure it out, and they're constantly sorting through it, and all the guys on the other side are trying to figure out and sort through it and trying to find these different ways of like, oh, is it because we did this, because we did that? Well, now we're TradCon, now we're this, now we're that. Like they're all just trying to figure it out because they all know something's off, but obviously no one's figured out what's actually off. And I can tell you what's actually off is all the stuff that I've been talking about for a while that I'm saying is what is off, which is what I said in the videos and why I said it, because I think that's what's off. And I think that's what's causing people to be perfect candidates for a dystopian world. Because the dystopia isn't, I don't believe it's necessarily just a top down power play. I think it's ultimately because people are so dysfunctional and dehumanized that that's all they can really handle. That's all they can muster. Because if we listen to everything that I've been saying in this live stream about emotional intelligence and what that is, if you remove all that stuff and then you look at what ends up arising as a result, which is a highly insecure person with no empathy, no ability to listen, that insists that everyone must be like them and must fit all their hypervigilant criteria, no human being can do that. So they're already past the human door is closed. Maybe they'll get a dog and that'll be good, but there's still going to be something empty and something missing, which can only be filled by AI, which will coincidentally be exactly what they want, how they want, when they want, precision. And they can change it whenever they want. Oh, today I want a girl that's like this. Oh, today I want a guy that's like that. Oh, now I need this. Now I need that. It's just completely a self absorbed, insecure endeavor. But the thing is, the ship's already sailed. Like the decisions have already been made. People are already invested in these things. It's done. It's coming. It's here. Like maybe people can course correct. I don't know. It's hard for me to really ascertain because I talk about these things on the internet and I don't get a lot of dialogue from people in response. So my assumption is that mostly what I say is like on deaf ears. Mostly, obviously, there's, you know, the 20% or 25% or 30% or whatever it might be of people who are actually engaged and listening and understanding and trying to um, not even agree or disagree with what I'm saying, but actually just understand it and use their functional brain to reflect and like kind of like move through the world in a different way. Because that's the thing is, I don't care if people agree or disagree. It's like, do you actually understand? Do you see where I'm coming from and how I got there and what I'm saying? And then from there, you can decide whether that works for you or whether you want to do it or not. That's fine. That's just being a human, being an adult, and being two different people. Of course, we have different inclinations, different desires, different life experience, different hopes, dreams, blah, 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 blah. Like it's the variety of human experience. All I can do is tell the truth based on what I see and feel and arrive at as being true based in my experience as a human being. That's it. I think that's just kind of the best we can do. And I try to say that and present things exactly as that because that's what's true, which is why I'm not on here pretending to be some guru or teacher or authority or enlightened, evolved being. And I don't use that language. I don't use any of that kind of shit um, because it's not true. Like if I open my heart and have overwhelming love and compassion for everyone, then I'll tell you. I'll come on here and that's where I'll speak from because that will actually be true. I don't. Occasionally I have moments where I'm like, I don't know, maybe, and then I'm like, ah, fuck that. Um, uh, but yeah, so this is the best I can do, and I trust that people are adults and they can make their own decisions or not. I came here for the monotone. It's exciting. Well, I hope to deliver the monotone experience. Um, so yeah, that was the question about AI. I think that ship's already sailed. I think that's just what people want. Like a lot of life is just supply and demand in the way I see it. Meaning, for example, we look at documentaries of cult leaders that were exploitive or ripped people off, and everyone blames the cult leader. Whereas I blame the people that demanded what they were supplying. They're the ones that are at fault, large in part. Like people will blame the OnlyFans girls. Oh, they're thoughts and sluts and whatever, whatever, and they're bringing down society. And I'm like, well, what about the million dudes that are paying that money? I think they're probably more at fault. They could also just say, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to do it. But they don't. So they are being supplied with that which they are demanding. So, on a larger scale, I think that's why one of the reasons why the political system, at least in America, is the absolute joke that it is. Because everyone wants to blame the politicians, they're greedy, they're corrupt, which, sure, or they're psychopaths or sociopaths or pathological liars, etc. But the thing is, that's what millions of people are demanding. That's what most of the country is demanding. That's what most of the country is okay with and completely complicit within. So they're getting what they're demanding. And that's just the irony and the hilariousness of all of it. Because the thing is, and I've said this before, I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. If you have a person that's at a minimum, a pathological liar with no conscience, and maybe they're a sociopath or psychopath or whatever, but let's just say at a minimum, we can all agree that they are a pathological liar and a greedy, soulless person. But then 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 million people love them, revere them, look up to them, get very excited when they speak. Who's more at fault there, really? I would say the millions of people that are demanding what they're supplying would be more large in part at fault. Um, so yeah, it's just supply and demand. And the other thing too is I can almost guarantee that the people that are against those people, I would say if you took them and put them in those same exact positions, they would do probably the same exact thing. Meaning if I came to you and I was like, "Hey, here's billions of dollars. Here's carte blanche to pretty much do whatever you want while being insulated from the consequences of your actions." I think that's where morality would begin. And I almost guarantee, I would wager a lot that most people under those same conditions would probably do the same thing or worse. Because it's really easy to take the moral high ground when you have no power, you have no skin in the game, you have no stake, you have no actual tests. And I think ultimately for a lot of people, their sense of morality or values only exist up until they have a good enough opportunity to compromise them. Great example of this. All the guys that are like, oh, women are terrible and oh, they're feminists and feminist ideology ruined America. And they're, not polygamous, but what's the tree branching thing? I can't remember what they call it. Anyways, they just throw in all these pejoratives and all these terms and just like blame everything on women. But it's like, but you're jerking at the porn. You're watching OnlyFans. You're probably going on Tinder and like trying to hook up and get free casual sex from women. So you're actively engaged in the exact behaviors that you claim to be against. Like all these Christian dudes that get outed for cheating on their wives or being on OnlyFans or all these other things. And it's like, wait, you're doing the exact thing that you claim to be against. Why? Because their sense of morality or integrity was only good enough up until they had a viable enough opportunity to compromise it. So that's what I'm saying is like all these like conspiracy oriented people that want to blame whatever. It's like, dude, I guarantee you, if you were in the same position, you would do the same or worse, hands down. Like, and you just feel very empowered behind the keyboard because you have no power. And that's probably why you're so upset, anyways, because you have no sense of power, authority, or influence, or um, sovereignty, or what's the word I'm looking for? Competency. So, anyways, that's a very unpopular opinion, I can say, from experience. Because I've made videos about it, and their comments were like, "Oh, you're a moron. You're denying this. You don't know this. You don't know that." I'm like, "No, you just didn't listen to anything that I just said. You just emotionally reacted because I didn't overtly agree with what you came in with. When in actuality, I do agree with you on a lot of things, and I didn't deny that certain things actually do exist. But also, I think they exist large in part because that's just what humans do. Doesn't matter what male, female, now, then, whatever. Humans predictably organize themselves in predictable fashions. It's not that complicated. It's not a mystery. Just look at history. It's like we're not that complicated. Like, and if it seems complicated, it's probably because someone's confused. If you actually just look at history, how humans organize, how things go, and then again, if you were in the same scenario, you'd probably do the same thing. It's not that much of a mystery. It's not as grandiose as it might seem. Anyways, there's a psychologist online that describes relationships in terms of returns and considers that for a lot of men, the return is very low, and that's why they're going to AI. Yeah, you're talking about psi hacks. Dr. Orion Taliban or Taraban or whatever. Is that who you're talking about? Um, it sounds like something he would say. Um, I mean, of course, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. But I mean, what's the return for a fucking AI relationship? Yeah. How did I know it was Dr. Orion Taliban? Every one of his videos is the exact same. It's like a 10 to 20 minute rant of him saying something that you could say in about 20 seconds, which maybe that's what maybe that's what this live stream is too. I could have just said it in 20 seconds, but uh, he's like a polished rich kid version of um, red pill guys. It's like he probably had a really good life, and I mean his name's Orion, so I'm assuming he's probably from the West Coast. His parents are probably hippies in some capacity. So I think he's probably just a grifter in some capacity. Because it's just like, hi, I'm a doctor, and today I'm going to tell you things that you already know and that everyone is obviously aware of. But I'm going to say it in a calming, somewhat soothing, organized voice. And I'm above average good looking. And I'm just going to say it because most of the red pill guys are disgusting, like Jabba the Hutt or just creepy 70s ex porn star looking people. So I'm a doctor, and I'm going to say it in a much more emotionally neutral way so people who have a bias towards being intellectual and smart can arrive at the same exact red pill conclusions, but in a way that makes them feel smart because it's psychology, which is just a grift, which, more power to them, man. Whatever works. Well, you got to pay the bills somehow. But yeah, I would say that it's definitely a lot of truth to that. And for a lot of men, I'm sure relationships are low in terms of returns, and I'm probably for some women, it's true too. But I would say the commonality is probably that both of them are lacking emotional intelligence, as I described it in the video, which is probably why they're ending up in those scenarios in the first place. But also true, there are these social dynamics that occur on large scales that have large in part wrecked people internally, so that their internal architecture just cannot handle an actual human relationship. And as I've been saying for years, it's the social media self-help, mental health, industrial complex doom loop. Like, I think if a man and a woman are going to date, they need to just delete social media and just be done with that and just not go into that world at all whatsoever. And if they do, maybe it's just about sports or it's about makeup or something completely unrelated. Because if you're going to be in a relationship and still consuming that poisonous, disgusting social media interrelationship kind of content, it's gonna grenade your relationship. I almost guarantee it, 1000%. And I think large in part that's why people are so screwed is because just they're just like guzzling information all the time, and it's just making their system. Well, I was thinking if we did this, but then if we did that, but then I read this, but then I heard that, but then I thought this, but then I thought that, but then I talked to my therapist, then I talked to my shaman, then I talked to my healer, then I talked to my friend, then I did that, then I went on a soul's journey, then I did ayahuasca, then I boofed whatever, then I did a plant medicine, then I did fasting, then I went to the gym, then I did a cold plunge, then I did. It's like I'm fucking exhausted just hearing it. No wonder you can't connect with your partner. No wonder you and your partner can't communicate because you're both 39 layers deep into just nothing. Because you can't even arrive at what's actually true and real between the two of you as a human being, which is probably something very simple because humans are fundamentally not that complicated. But obviously, it takes two to tango. So you got to have two people on board. And I can tell you from what you're describing and what Dr. Orion Taliban was describing, I've experienced that. And I just learned to say, nice meeting you. Not feeling connection, and I'll talk to you soon, or I'll talk to you never, actually, because the return just isn't there. There's nothing. There's no return. Like it's just. But the only reason that's there is because the other person is functioning from a place that I spent 20 minutes describing earlier in the video. Probably really insecure. Probably really hate themselves. Probably have a lot of self-loathing, which inhibits and handicaps them from being able to actually connect with other people in a meaningful way. What happens is women want men to be like them, which, as a large social dynamic, I think is mostly what's happened. A lot of really unhappy, lonely, emotionally and mentally unwell, and physiologically unwell women have taken to the internet, empowered by social media, empowered by therapy, mental illness, industrial complex, and made everything all about them. And then it invented all these different power structures and emotional victim Olympics to more or less coerce men to being more like them and giving themselves an infinite set of tools to just sort of shut down anyone and everyone. In large in part, a lot of therapy stuff actually is just aimed at making men more like women. Because their presupposition is, oh, your problem is that you're a toxic man and you're not enough like a woman. And if you're more like a woman, meaning more in touch with your emotions and more emotionally oriented, then actually all your problems would be go away and you'd be better. When the opposite is true, actually. Of course, there's exceptions, and there's times where people do need to go through that, but that's just not correct. Men don't function that way. They don't need to function that way. And honestly, no one's attracted to a man that functions in that way. Like this is the harsh truth about men and their feelings is that no one cares. Like literally no one cares. Like I don't care. I hear my own feelings and emotions and I'm like, I don't fucking care, really. I talk to my friends about it. They're like, yeah, I don't really care. Go to a therapist. They're like, yeah, I don't really care. If you talk about it on society in the world or society, they're like, yeah, I don't really care. You talk to a woman about it, she's like, yeah, I don't really care. Like, cool. Yeah, no one really cares. Like, because that's not necessarily how we function. Obviously, of course, it depends. Of course, there's exceptions, like, loving someone, uh, kindness, trust, like all these positive things that are maybe more qualities than necessarily emotions or feelings. Yeah, sure, yes, but like no one really cares. Just think about that. Like, if you're a guy and you're listening to this, do you actually really care about your own feelings? Or do you just feel like you should because someone told you should? That was probably a woman or a feminized guy that told you, oh, no, you really should. Which, of course, yes, in the instance that you're just got everything bundled it up and there's all this stuff bubbling below the surface. Yeah, definitely. There's something there that you maybe need to check out, which is why I talked about emotional intelligence and having self awareness, self regulation, communication skills. Yes. But the thing is, and even if it's a female, just to be really honest with yourself, do you really care about what a guy feels or what their emotion is on a one on one basis or especially a wider scale? Probably not, in with the exception of how it might benefit you. Meaning a female might care, oh, does he love me? Or does he think I'm X, Y, and Z because of how it makes me feel? Or basically, if you separate the conditional aspect of what you feel about them feeling it, do you actually care? I don't think so, actually. If you really look at people's actions and what they do and how they behave and how things actually are, I don't think people really actually care, which is why you hear time and time again of guys being like, yeah, I was vulnerable with my girlfriend and my wife, and that killed our relationship. She didn't respect me anymore. I told her my deepest insecurity and she didn't respect me anymore. She cheated on me. She wasn't attracted to me. Or she used it against me in an argument, which is, I can tell you that's what happens a lot. If you meet a girl who immediately, or you meet a woman who immediately wants to know about your traumas, maybe pause, because usually they don't actually want to know about your thing. They're trying to just check a list, check a box, or develop ammunition to use against you. Meaning, oh, you're behaving in this way because you have this thing. Oh, you said that. Oh, it's because you have this thing. Oh, you said that's because of this. It's a control mechanism. It's not coming from a place of love. Now, obviously, you need to use discernment because sometimes people are coming from a place of love. But I'm saying from the get go, immediately, like meeting a stranger. Oh, tell me about your traumas. Da, da, da. Let's I don't know about that. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier of really damaged, insecure, wounded people assuming that everyone is like that, when the fact of the matter is they're not. Not everyone is just struggling. Not everyone is like not everyone is like up to here and drowning in whatever. Some people are, yes. Some people are legitimately. Some people are that way because they're creating it for themselves on top of their luxurious, comfortable lifestyle. So that's what I mean. You gotta use common sense. But I'm just saying, I encourage these thought experiments and self-reflection to see if people really, really actually care, and then to actually really go back and see what's really behind what it is they're saying, what it is they're doing, and just actually investigating within themselves to arrive at an actual position of truth and understanding in themselves, in their own authority. Um, because I've talked about this before, and I said stuff about unconditional love, and people got really mad about that. Like, uh, so I'm not going to get into that one because I've already probably said some trigger warning type stuff. But I'm just saying, look into it, investigate it for yourself. Agree, disagree, whatever. Yeah. Would you say you're a naturalist? I don't know what that means. I guess it depends on how you define the term. I honestly never think of myself and try to think about an ist or an ism. I just think and follow whatever. Um, so I can't really answer that. But the way you're describing it sounds pretty accurate, from wanting to understand the basis of reality and working from there and pinpoint bias and emotional judgments to be aware. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I should, but that's from years of suppressing emotions and thus hurting my life. The thing is it the emotions that were hurting your life, or is it the decisions that you made that were hurting your life? Therapy and society and whatever tells you, oh, it's the emotions, which Okay, sure. I mean, I don't know you. I don't know the situation. But I think in reality, it's probably the decisions that you made, not the emotions. Like, for example, if I'm going to go give like when I used to do a lot of public speaking, my actual emotion towards public speaking was negative. Thinking about it didn't make me feel good. Doing it, well, doing it was fine, kind of. But everything that led up to it was negative. So suppressing my emotion, or maybe not suppressing it, but just saying, like, okay, I feel terrible, but whatever, I'm going to make a different decision. I think that was actually useful. Literally everything in my life that's been positive has usually started with a negative feeling or emotion. Taking a risk. Like yesterday, I did X amount of push ups. Everything I felt about having to do that was negative, but I had to suppress that and do the thing that I needed to do because I told myself I would do it because I need to do it, or I think I need to do it because it's just healthy. But I didn't want to, and I don't really feel good about it. I got no emotional reward from it. I'm not like, good job, yay, you did this thing. Oh my god, amazing. Actually, no, my shoulders hurt, my arms hurt, and I feel terrible about it. Like, but I'm gonna do it. So, but I could have also not done it. Oh, well, I feel negative about this and I have some anxiety about this and it feels bad. So I'm going to not do it. Okay. Okay. If I follow that for 10 years, that's going to put me in a different position where I do what I need to do because I know it's the right thing to do, regardless of what I feel about it. So I don't know if it's the suppressing of the emotion or the actual decisions or the choices that we make. Because again, we're not women. Speaking personally as a man, talking to other men, we're not women. We don't function from an emotional basis. We do not have a uterus. We are not in sync with the moon. We do not, or possibly in sync with the moon. We're not sensitive and cued into the environment. That's not how we function. That's how women function. Women function from their heart center, from emotion and from expression and from creativity and from that whole thing, and from being in tune with, or possibly being in tune with the moon and being in touch with the environment and the planet and all these different things. Not us. That's not how we function. And the thing is, we know this. Women know this. Everyone knows this, which is why there's such a push to make us a different way. And it just doesn't work. Or it makes people, guys, really kind of sus, kind of off. And it makes guys feel like shit, makes their health worse. It makes them more confused. It makes them more passive aggressive and angry and bitchy and complainy and whatever, because it's the wrong direction. Like, you're making a bad decision in the wrong direction. So you should feel bad. You should feel negative because it's a negative choice. Oh, but no, it's good for me. And someone told me I should do it. Okay. So now you're disregarding your feelings in maybe not a healthy manner, in following negative outcomes because of some idea. So I mean, it comes down to discernment and using our brain to reflect. Because, like, yeah, I don't want to do push-ups, but I know it's good for me. And I know it's the right thing, and it actually does produce positive outcomes, even if my emotions or feelings are negative about it. So that's a great instance. Just like starting a business, approaching a stranger, starting a conversation, being vulnerable, being creative, trying to learn a new skill, pushing yourself to any degree is going to feel negative, but it will lead to a positive outcome, hopefully, versus that's all been kind of hijacked and pushing people into doing the wrong stuff that produce negative outcomes, but then they just kind of suppress it and ignore it in a way that's not really, um, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it just, again, like I'm saying, comes down to the decision. So the more you suppress something, the less effective you become at making decisions because they taint your clarity. So emotional suppression affects decision making. Like I said, it depends. Depends on what are you suppressing. Because I would argue that actually having a better solving the problem would usually result in that emotion dissolving anyways. For example, let's say I'm dating a partner or I'm dating a woman that it's not actually very functional. I don't actually like it and it makes me feel bad. So, yeah, the more I suppress that emotion, the more it's just going to bubble under the surface and the more resentment and the more that relationship's just going to be negative, right? Or if I problem solve the situation and remove myself from it because I can arrive and understand that it's not the great thing, then that negative feeling that I'm having to suppress goes away. And if it doesn't, and you're carrying it around and it's a grudge and it's then distorting your perception, then yeah, that's where you actually need to look at it and address it. Because I've been talking about these strong lenses and biases. So yeah, if it's something that's distorting your position, then sure, you might need to take a look at that and sort through that and see what's going on there so that you can not be so distorted. That's kind of what I'm saying. Um, so yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know you. I don't know your situation. I don't know anything other than the 50 or 100 characters you put on the screen. So all I can do is speak in general terms from my limited information and opinion. Um, so I'm not giving black and white answers. I'm just giving examples to illustrate my point, and also agreeing with you that of course there's situations in which it's not a great thing. Um, so what you're saying is that the natural intuition of men versus women is actually a beneficial thing. For example, if men don't want work but they have to. I mean, that's not what I said because it's not what I said. Because intuition can be positive or negative. You have to take it in in account with other things, not just take it exclusively. Um, for guys or girls, doesn't matter. Men or women, doesn't matter. Intuition can be wrong. It could not be intuition. It could be something else entirely. Um, it can be beneficial, but it can also be pretty dumb. My intuition tells me I need to eat cookies every night. Like, there's just tons of examples of people's intuition. The thing is, like, I don't care about the word. Called instinct, called intuition. Like, the more you try to just find this rigid, fixed thing and dial it into, like, an ism or a word is, I think, the harder your life will be. That degree of mental tension, fixation just makes things a bit more difficult. I'm trying to talk about things that are maybe a little more fluid. So, like, uh yeah, but also too, this is a chat and we don't know each other, so maybe I'm just completely misconstruing what you're saying and it's, limited context. So I'm just kind of trying to grasp straws here in the dark and do my best to understand what it is that you mean. Let's see. I just don't get what you mean. If men don't want work, but they have to versus intellectual reasons. Um, I'm just saying that, like, my point was simply that if you are a guy, a man, um, you should perhaps not try to be like a woman and realize that there are inherent differences, which are positive, beneficial, and wonderful. Um, that was my main point. And that if you are a man, then I don't think you should really be functioning from your emotions. Just obviously take note of them, be aware of them, have them, sure. But you should be functioning from a sense of duty, honor, responsibility, um, goal oriented, action oriented, problem solving, creative, whatever. That should be kind of your mode of operation, not just what you feel. Because guys that function from what they feel are children. That's it. That was kind of my point. And like no men don't respect other men that function like that, and women sure as shit don't respect men that function like that. And the ones that do are probably not the ones that they are probably ones that only like men that function like that because they can push their buttons. And what I've been saying for years is that if you orientate yourself around things which are transient and unstable, you will feel unstable. If you orientate yourself around things which are a bit more stable, reliable, and solid, you will feel more reliable and solid. So when you take a large population, male or female, and you make them orientate and fixate upon things that are unstable, i.e., their feelings and emotions, the direct outcome is that they will feel unstable, which that can go off in a whole manner of different directions and is very profitable and makes people very easy to control and manipulate. Extremely easy, which is what I've been saying for years. And I remember I was talking about it. People were kind of making fun of me, like, "Oh, you're a loser. Oh, you need a girlfriend. Oh, you need to get a life. Oh, you need to whatever." I'm like, really? Like, so I should be less intelligent, more immature, more childish, and that's going to make my life better? I can tell you, I tried it. I tried living that way in my 20s, and it was not great. It was not a beneficial endeavor. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. But to go back to what I said, emotional intelligence is a dynamic and adaptable combination of self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, relationship management skills, communication skills, empathy, and motivation. People are free to define them as they go. And the last thing I'll say about that is insecure, manipulative people will use these concepts and these types of things usually in a manner that is something like, you are selfish for not doing what I want you to do. You are selfish for not agreeing with me. That's a really common fallacy that has a lot of permutations and a lot of manifestations, but I'll leave you with that to to research and look into in the world and see how often it occurs, especially between male female um, romantic relationships. So yeah, that's all I had for today. This actually went longer than I had anticipated, which is good. These were good questions. Happy to discuss these concepts. Sorry if I didn't really do a good job. It's sometimes hard to understand exactly, from just such a little context. Um, but yeah, it's a weird thing is you can see me, and there's obviously more information here because of body language and tonality, etc. Um, Whereas all I see is a name, which thankfully Pierre and Carlos actually have a real name, and V and Gerald. And whereas some people are just like, username 7919 says, and I'm like, oh, cool. That gives me a lot of context. uh, but yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hopefully something here was beneficial or useful, because ultimately that's what I'm after. Because these ideas have been useful for me to make sense of things. Because for me personally, when encountering dynamics or situations in the world with people, etc., if I understand it and know what it is, I can empathize with it. I can understand where people are coming from, and I can thus respond and navigate more in a more effective manner, I think. Not everyone agrees, but can only do the best. Anyways, that's that. I appreciate everyone too. Oh man, look. There's like a share screen option here now. I didn't know that. That's cool. Google just include or Chrome just added a share. I got YouTube, I guess. added a share screen. So that's cool. That's going to be really handy for future live streams because I can actually have an outline or use different examples of things and share my screen and walk people through it. Um, so that'll be cool. That'll actually, I think, probably help things in the future. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. If people have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or any uh, requests for anything. Definitely put them in there. But I will say, just as a closing point, I know um, to some people, a lot of what I'm saying can seem critical or harsh or in some manner degree negative. Personally, I don't think it is because there's a lot of joy and beauty and great things in my life. This is just 90 minutes of me talking about something that I spent 5 or 10 minutes thinking about. And I just encourage people to find joy and, beautiful, nice things in their own life, whether that's other people or endeavors or just appreciating nature or food or music or whatever it is. Just, you know, do those basic things. But then at the same time, I feel like me saying those things is pedantic and sort of patronizing. So that's why I don't really make videos like that because it feels kind of weird to go to another adult and be like, hey, have you found beauty in your life today? It just sounds a bit weird. Um, but I do encourage it. And I personally, that's what I really try to live by and through, even though people might not necessarily guess that because my personality is pretty monotone and chill. And I don't present because for me, my view is it's my experience of life. I don't need to take my penis out and show it to everyone, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It's like this is my internal emotional way of relating to the world that I'm okay with me knowing. I don't need to go on YouTube and be like, look how look at me. Oh, look, my life's so great. Oh, I love everything. Please look and validate this and that. Da, da. It's like it just seems a little bit like some things should still be private. Um, yeah, like because sometimes I have the idea of trying to grow on social media and have a larger reach, but then I'm like, I really don't want to be on social media. I don't want to be in front of my computer or my phone all the time creating content. Um, so it's a bit of a because the thing is, I think social media is an amazing tool to connect and exchange information, but like some people really need to get a life. I see some of these people that are just chronically online. You look at their Twitter, 50,000 tweets. I'm like, dude, you need to get a life, man. Like, get off the internet. Go do something instead of just influencing all the time. To what end? I'm influencing so I can spend more time influencing. My life's amazing so I can spend more time on my computer. More power to you if that's what you want to do, but no, that's not great. Anyway, that's a rant, that's a tangent, but just trying to end on a positive note and encourage people to, um, yeah, do these positive, enjoyable things. Uh, yeah, yeah, I know. I just don't like being on my phone enough to be an influencer. So, but anyways, again, I really appreciate everyone tuning in, Pierre and V and Carlos, and the couple others that are at the top that I can't see that tuned in. Appreciate it. Hope you're doing well wherever you are on the planet, whatever time it is. Any requests, be sure to drop them in. Oh, yeah. Favorite vegan Qigong social media influencer. That's me. You forgot non binary, gender fluid, polyamorous, anti capitalist, anti racist, anti fascist, immortal, um, vegan Qigong influencer. So next time you address me, I will expect you to include the appropriate amount of adjectives and pronouns. Otherwise, you will be blocked because I have no space in my world for anyone who's not overtly against the same things that I'm against. I'm kidding, obviously. Um, but yeah. Uh, Also, too, if you want to sign up for my weekend seminar, it's only 3 easy payments of $11,111, and there's only 69 spots available. So I hope to make over whatever the math is on that. I'm not going to do it in my head. Sign up now. Spots are limited, and I will teach you the secrets of how to speak exclusively in a monotone voice on the internet to a $120 webcam. Yeah. If you want to be entertained, go on Instagram and look at these accounts of like influencers in the wild, and there's a couple other ones that are just absolutely hilarious. Anyways, thanks for showing up, Wolfgang, Pierre, V, Carlos, and the others. I'm getting hungry and tired, so I'm gonna go eat a cheeseburger and do some push-ups because I'm need to do more push-ups. Anyways, thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next time. And post any questions or comments in the videos. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll talk to you soon.